I'll destroy you. Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley send final warning to Paul Heyman in Survivor Series 2025. The most shocking alliance in wrestling history just declared war. Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley, two men who represent everything different about professional wrestling, two competitors who have been on opposite sides of the industry for years, just stood side by side at Survivor Series 2025 and delivered a message to Paul Heyman that has sent shockwaves through the entire wrestling world. "I'll destroy you" were Roman's exact words, and Moxley followed with his own chilling promise that Paul Heyman's days of manipulation are over. But here's what's going to make you absolutely furious: Paul Heyman, the man who helped create both of these monsters, who built Roman into the tribal chief and turned Dean Ambrose into a main event star, is now facing the consequences of his years of manipulation and betrayal. This isn't just a storyline anymore, this is two apex predators united in their desire to end Paul Heyman's career, and Survivor Series just became the stage for the most personal vendetta in modern wrestling. The Wiseman is about to learn that you can't manipulate everyone forever without eventually facing consequences. Drop your shock right now. Comment "never saw this" if this alliance completely blindsided you, or knew it if you somehow predicted Roman and Moxley would team up. Because this partnership is breaking every rule of wrestling logic and creating the most unpredictable situation WWE has seen in years. Let me set the stage for how we got to this absolutely insane moment at Survivor Series 2025. Paul Heyman has spent the past several months playing dangerous games with everyone around him. After his controversial comments about Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch's family, after manipulating various members of the bloodline, after years of scheming and plotting, Heyman's actions have finally caught up with him in the most spectacular way possible. Roman Reigns, who many thought would protect Heyman forever, has apparently reached his breaking point with his longtime advocate's manipulations. Reports suggest that Heyman made moves behind Roman's back that directly undermined the tribal chief's authority. Whatever Heyman did was so egregious that Roman has completely turned on the man who helped him become the most dominant champion in modern WWE history. But Roman turning on Heyman alone would be big news. What makes this nuclear is that Roman has partnered with Jon Moxley. The same Jon Moxley who returned to WWE and has been causing chaos. The same Moxley who represents everything anti-establishment and anti-corporate. The same Moxley who spent years in AEW specifically to get away from WWE's corporate structure. That Moxley is now aligned with Roman Reigns to take down Paul Heyman. The visual of Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley standing side by side is something nobody thought they'd see. These two men have taken completely different paths through wrestling. Roman embraced WWE's corporate structure and became its biggest star. Moxley rejected that structure and found success by being unpredictable and dangerous. They represent opposing philosophies of wrestling, yet they're united by their desire to destroy Paul Heyman. Alliance shock question: on a scale of 1 to 10, how shocking is the Roman/Moxley alliance? Comment your number. 1 means you saw it coming, 10 means your jaw is still on the floor. The Survivor Series segment itself was masterfully executed and showed WWE at its absolute best. The show was building toward the traditional Survivor Series elimination matches when suddenly the lights went out. When they came back on, Jon Moxley was standing in the ring with a microphone, and the crowd absolutely erupted. Moxley cut a promo about Paul Heyman being a cancer on professional wrestling, a manipulator who uses people and discards them when they're no longer useful. Moxley said he's been watching Heyman operate for years, and he's sick of seeing talented wrestlers get used and manipulated by someone who never steps in the ring himself. Then Moxley dropped the bombshell. He said he's not alone in his vendetta against Heyman. He said there's someone else who's finally seen through Heyman's lies and manipulation. Someone who Heyman betrayed in the worst possible way. Someone who has the power to make Heyman pay for everything he's done. And that's when Roman Reigns' music hit. The crowd went absolutely insane as the tribal chief walked out, but this wasn't the Roman we've seen recently. This was a different Roman, focused, angry, and clearly done with Paul Heyman's games. Roman got in the ring and stood next to Moxley, and the two men who should be enemies just stared at the camera with pure violence in their eyes. Roman grabbed a microphone and spoke directly to Paul Heyman, wherever he was. Roman said, "Paul, you made me who I am, but you also betrayed me. You put your own interests above the bloodline's interests. You manipulated my family, you used my name, and you thought I'd never find out." The pain in Roman's voice was real and made this feel so much more personal than a typical wrestling angle. Roman continued, "I'll destroy you, Paul. Not just destroy your reputation, not just destroy your legacy, but destroy you. And I'm not going to do it alone." Roman gestured to Moxley, and the two men nodded at each other in this moment of mutual understanding that gave everyone chills. Promo delivery question: whose promo was more effective, Roman's emotional betrayal speech or Moxley's anti-manipulation crusade? Comment Roman or Moxley with your pick. Jon Moxley then delivered his part of the final warning, and it was chilling in its simplicity. Moxley said, "Heyman, you've spent your career talking your way out of trouble, using other people to fight your battles, hiding behind bigger and stronger men. At Survivor Series, there's nowhere to hide. Roman and I are coming for you, and you're going to answer for everything you've done. The specificity of making this threat at Survivor Series created immediate stakes and anticipation. This wasn't a vague future threat, this was a declaration that at this event, on this night, Paul Heyman would face consequences. That immediacy made everything feel more urgent and more real. Paul Heyman then appeared on the big screen, and you could see genuine fear on his face. Heyman, who's always controlled and composed, looked shaken by what he was seeing. He tried to talk his way out of it, tried to use his verbal skills to defuse the situation, but you could hear the desperation in his voice. Heyman said, "Roman, I never betrayed you. Everything I did was for your benefit, for the bloodline's benefit. Jon, you don't understand the full story. You're being manipulated into this situation." Heyman was trying to sow discord between Roman and Moxley, trying to break their alliance before it really began. But Roman cut Heyman off and said, "Save your words, Paul. I know everything you did. I have proof of your betrayal. And nothing you say tonight is going to change what's coming." That mention of proof added another layer to this story and made fans wonder what Heyman did that was so bad it turned Roman against him. Moxley added, "Heyman, Roman and I don't agree on much. We've taken different paths through this industry. But we agree on one thing: you need to pay for what you've done. And tonight, you're going to get what's coming to you." The acknowledgement that Roman and Moxley are strange bedfellows made their alliance feel more real and more interesting. Heyman's fear question: was Paul Heyman's fear genuine, or is this all part of an elaborate scheme? Comment genuine fear or Heyman scheme with your theory. The challenge was then issued in the most dramatic way possible. Roman Reigns said, "Paul Heyman, you have until the end of Survivor Series to find anyone who will stand beside you and face Jon Moxley and me in a match. Find a tag team, find bodyguards, find anyone who's willing to protect you from us. Because when we find you, and we will find you, there needs to be someone between us or you're going to get destroyed." This was genius booking because it created multiple potential outcomes. Who would be willing to stand with Paul Heyman against Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley? What members of the bloodline would side with Heyman over Roman? Would Heyman recruit from outside WWE? Every possibility created intrigue and speculation. The stipulation was added that if Heyman doesn't find partners by the end of the night, then Roman and Moxley get to do whatever they want to Heyman with no consequences. That added real stakes and made Heyman's desperation throughout the night feel justified and urgent. The rest of Survivor Series became about Paul Heyman frantically trying to recruit people to protect him. Backstage segments showed Heyman approaching different wrestlers, offering them money, opportunities, anything to get them to stand beside him. But everyone was either too afraid of Roman and Moxley or didn't want to get involved in Heyman's mess. Heyman approached former bloodline members, rejected. He approached main event stars, rejected. He approached tag teams, rejected. Nobody wanted to stand between Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley when they're unified in their desire for destruction. Each rejection made Heyman more desperate and more panicked. The genius of this storytelling is that it showed Paul Heyman, who spent his career making deals and alliances, completely unable to find anyone willing to help him. All those years of manipulation meant that nobody trusted Heyman enough to risk Roman and Moxley's wrath. Heyman's chickens had come home to roost. Booking appreciation question: rate the storytelling structure of Heyman desperately searching for allies throughout the night. Scale of 1 to 10, comment your number. As Survivor Series progressed through its traditional elimination matches, the tension built because everyone knew that at the end of the night, Heyman would either have protection or face Roman and Moxley alone. Every match had an underlying current of what's going to happen with Heyman. The traditional Survivor Series matches were excellent, but they felt like they were building to something bigger. The crowd was hot for the matches, but you could feel the anticipation for the Heyman situation. That's smart booking, using your traditional elements to build to your biggest angle. About 2 hours into Survivor Series, Solo Sikoa appeared on screen with Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa. Fans immediately thought there's Heyman's protection. The bloodline members who aren't Roman will protect Heyman, but Solo had other ideas. Solo cut a promo saying, "Paul Heyman, you manipulated our family. You used the bloodline for your own gain. We're not standing with Roman against you, but we're definitely not standing with you against Roman. You're on your own." That declaration sent the crowd into a frenzy and made Heyman's situation even more desperate. The fact that even bloodline members loyal to Solo refused to help Heyman showed how completely alone Heyman was. He'd burned every bridge, manipulated every person, and now when he needed help most, nobody would stand with him. With about 30 minutes left in the show, it became clear that Heyman had failed to find protection. Backstage cameras showed Heyman looking absolutely panicked, sweating, trying to figure out how to escape the arena. Security stopped him at every exit, making it clear that Roman and Moxley had ensured Heyman couldn't run. Heyman's last-ditch attempt question: if you were Paul Heyman, what would you do in this situation? Comment your escape plan or survival strategy. The final segment of Survivor Series began with Paul Heyman being forced to come to the ring by security. Heyman was pleading with security, offering them money, trying anything to not have to go to that ring. But security, presumably under orders from WWE management, escorted Heyman to the ring. Heyman got in the ring alone, grabbed a microphone with shaking hands, and made one final plea. Roman, Jon, please. We can talk about this. I can explain everything. I can make this right. We don't need to do this. Heyman's voice was cracking, and whether it was acting or genuine fear, it was compelling television. Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley's music hit simultaneously, and the two men walked out together. The visual of these two destroyers side by side, united in purpose, walking toward the ring where Paul Heyman stood alone, was incredible. This is the kind of moment that defines wrestling at its best. Roman and Moxley got in the ring and circled Heyman like predators circling prey. Heyman was backing into the corner, still trying to talk his way out, still trying to use his words as weapons. But you could see on Roman and Moxley's faces that words weren't going to save Heyman this time. And then, in a moment that will be controversial and talked about for months, Roman and Moxley proceeded to beat down Paul Heyman. Not a quick attack, not a couple of moves, a systematic destruction of Paul Heyman that went on for several minutes. Roman hit Heyman with a Superman punch. Moxley hit Paradigm Shift. They took turns delivering punishment to the man who'd manipulated them both. The crowd reaction was mixed and fascinating. Some fans were cheering the destruction of a heel character. Others were uncomfortable with the level of violence against a non-wrestler. That division in the crowd showed this was complex storytelling that didn't have easy answers. Beatdown reaction question: was the beatdown of Paul Heyman justified, or did Roman and Moxley go too far? Comment justified or too far with your take. As Roman and Moxley stood over Heyman's broken body, Roman grabbed a microphone and delivered one final message. Paul, this is what happens when you manipulate people. This is what happens when you think you're smarter than everyone else. This is what happens when you betray the tribal chief. Roman's words had finality to them, like this was truly the end of something. Moxley added, Heyman, you're finished. Your days of pulling strings are over. You don't control Roman anymore, you don't control anyone anymore. You're just a man who talks, and talking won't save you from men who fight. Moxley's words reinforced that this was about power and who really has it. The show ended with Roman and Moxley's music playing while they stood over Heyman. No celebration, no smiles, just two men who'd accomplished their goal of making Paul Heyman pay. The final image was powerful and left fans with so many questions about what comes next. But wait, there's more to this story that we need to discuss. The implications of this alliance between Roman and Moxley extend far beyond just their vendetta against Heyman. This could reshape WWE's entire power structure and create new dynamics we've never seen before. If Roman and Moxley remain aligned, they're arguably the most powerful duo in wrestling. Two former world champions, two of the most dangerous competitors, working together? That's a force that could dominate WWE for months or years. But how long can this alliance last? The tension points are obvious. Roman represents WWE's corporate establishment while Moxley represents anti-establishment chaos. Their alliance is born of shared purpose, but what happens when Heyman is gone and they don't have a common enemy? Do they turn on each other? Do they go their separate ways? Do they find new targets? Future alliance question: how long will the Roman/Moxley alliance last? Comment one night, few months, or long term with your prediction. The impact on the bloodline as a stable is massive and raises questions about what happens next. If Roman has turned against Paul Heyman, does that mean he's also turning against the manipulation and politics that defined his tribal chief character? Is this a character evolution for Roman where he becomes more straightforward and less calculating? Solo Siko's faction of the bloodline, assuming he has won, now exists in a weird space where they're not with Roman but they're also not against him. That creates interesting storytelling possibilities where Solo and Roman might cooperate on some things while competing on others. That nuance is more interesting than simple allies or enemies. The question of where Paul Heyman goes from here is fascinating because he's been such a central figure in WWE storytelling for so long. Does Heyman take time off to recover from this attack? Does he return with new clients seeking revenge? Does he genuinely retire from on-screen appearances? Each option creates different storytelling paths. If Heyman returns with new clients, who would trust him after watching Roman and Moxley destroy him for his manipulation? What wrestler would be desperate or foolish enough to align with Heyman knowing what happened? That's a great character question for any potential Heyman client. The possibility that this is all an elaborate work and Heyman planned this somehow can't be completely dismissed. Paul Heyman is the ultimate manipulator in WWE storylines. Maybe he wanted Roman and Moxley to unite against him for some larger purpose we don't understand yet. That conspiracy theory is probably wrong, but it's fun to consider. Heyman's future question: what should Paul Heyman do next after this attack? Comment: take time off, revenge, new clients, or retire with your booking idea. Let's discuss the booking genius of this entire angle because WWE really threaded the needle perfectly. They created a situation where fans could sympathize with both Roman and Moxley, despite their heel/face alignments, because their vendetta against Heyman felt justified. That's sophisticated storytelling that respects audience intelligence. The slow build throughout the night of Heyman trying to find protection created tension and anticipation. Instead of just having a match announced, WWE made fans wait and wonder, building investment in the outcome. That patience in storytelling is rare and should be celebrated. The use of traditional Survivor Series matches as the undercard for this bigger story showed respect for the event's history while also building to something new. WWE didn't abandon their traditional structure, they enhanced it by adding this overarching narrative. The visual storytelling of Roman and Moxley's partnership was perfect. They never looked friendly or like natural allies, they looked like two dangerous men with a shared goal. That maintained their individual characters while showing their temporary alliance. That's nuanced character work. The crowd management throughout the show was expert level. WWE guided audience reactions through commentary, pacing, and character positioning. Fans knew when to cheer, when to gasp, and when to just watch in shock. That mastery of crowd psychology is what separates good wrestling from great wrestling. Storytelling craft question: what was the best storytelling element of this entire angle? Comment Heyman's desperation, Roman/Moxley alliance, slow build, or final beatdown with your pick. The historical significance of this Survivor Series will be discussed for years in wrestling circles. This is the kind of event that becomes a reference point. Remember when Roman and Moxley teamed up to destroy Heyman at Survivor Series 2025? That's the goal of any major wrestling event. The comparison to other great Survivor Series moments is inevitable. This joins moments like The Shield's debut, The Rock and John Cena's original confrontation, and other legendary Survivor Series segments. That's the company this segment belongs in. The social media reaction to this has been absolutely nuclear, with wrestling fans around the world sharing clips, creating memes, and debating every aspect of the storyline. This is exactly the kind of wrestling content that transcends the wrestling bubble and gets mainstream attention. Wrestling journalists are calling this one of the best executed wrestling angles of the year. The combination of character work, storytelling, and dramatic presentation has critics praising WWE's creative direction. That critical acclaim matters for WWE's reputation. The mainstream sports media is even picking up this story because the Roman/Moxley alliance is such unexpected and interesting news. When wrestling breaks through to mainstream coverage, that's success for WWE's business. Media coverage question: does mainstream media attention help or hurt wrestling as an art form? Comment helps or hurts with your take on wrestling getting mainstream attention. Let's address the potential criticisms of this angle because not everyone will love it. Some fans think the violence against Paul Heyman went too far and was uncomfortable to watch. Those fans have a legitimate concern about the optics of two larger men beating up an older non-wrestler. Others might criticize the Roman/Moxley alliance as too unbelievable or forced. These fans would argue that Roman and Moxley have no logical reason to trust each other enough to form this alliance. That criticism requires ignoring the enemy of my enemy logic, but it's out there. There's also criticism that this made Paul Heyman look too weak and vulnerable. Heyman has been built up as a mastermind for decades, and having him completely unable to find allies and then getting destroyed might damage his character's mystique. That's a fair concern about character protection. Some fans wanted more from the confrontation, a match rather than a beatdown, or perhaps interference that saved Heyman at the last second. These fans feel like the payoff didn't quite match the build-up. That's subjective and depends on what each viewer wanted. The pacing critics might say that devoting so much of Survivor Series to this angle took away from the traditional elimination matches. If you came to Survivor Series primarily for the team warfare, this Heyman story might have felt like a distraction rather than an enhancement. Valid criticism question: what's the most valid criticism of this angle? Comment with what you think WWE could have done better. The match possibilities coming out of this angle are extensive and exciting. Roman Reigns vs. Jon Moxley for WWE Championship seems inevitable eventually. When allies become opponents, those matches have built-in heat in history. Paul Heyman returning with new clients to get revenge on Roman and Moxley creates multiple potential feuds. Whoever Heyman aligns with immediately has a ready-made storyline with clear motivations and stakes. The factional warfare between different versions of the bloodline could dominate WWE programming for months. Roman leading one faction, Solo leading another, all while dealing with external threats. That's years of storytelling. Mixed tag scenarios involving Roman, Moxley, and their potential allies versus Heyman's recruits and allies creates variety in match types and keeps things fresh. WWE has a whole roster to play with in extending this story. The eventual betrayal when Roman and Moxley inevitably turn on each other will be massive and could main event WrestleMania. That's the kind of long-term storytelling that WWE should be building toward. Future match question: what's the first major match that should come from this angle? Comment your match prediction including who faces who and where. Final big question before we wrap up: rate this entire Survivor Series angle from beginning to end on a scale of 1 to 10. Comment your number giving your complete evaluation of the Roman/Moxley/Heyman story. The bottom line is this: Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley have formed the most shocking alliance in wrestling to destroy Paul Heyman, and Survivor Series 2025 delivered one of the most memorable and talked about wrestling segments in recent history. Whether you loved it or had criticisms, you cannot deny this was significant and will have lasting impact. This is the kind of bold, unpredictable storytelling that makes wrestling appointment viewing. WWE took risks, delivered on promises, and created a moment that will be remembered and referenced for years. That's success by any measure. Subscribe to Wrestling Newsletter for daily coverage of the fallout from Survivor Series. Hit that like button if you're still processing what you witnessed, and turn on notifications for all our continued coverage. Share this video with every wrestling fan because this is the story everyone needs to discuss. Roman Reigns and Jon Moxley just redefined what's possible in WWE, Paul Heyman just paid the price for years of manipulation, and Survivor Series 2025 just became an instant classic. This is wrestling at its absolute finest, and if you're not watching, you're missing history. Let's go!